Hi, I'm Dr. Glen Nagel, and I'm here today with Mountain Rose Herbs to talk about how to make homemade root beer syrup. Well, I'm fascinated by root beer because it's one of Americana's famous recipes. You know, the history of root beer is fascinating. When you look at the original recipes come from Appalachia folk doctors and wise women who created a decoction flavored with local herbs and barks, sugared it, carbonated it, and then it became very, very popular. And we think of root beer now as one of the classic sodas. But the root beer of today is not something I really want to drink. It's super high in processed sugar. All the flavors are fake. There's actually no roots in most root beer, no real roots. There's just artificial flavor. The sugar content, and then it's also high in sugar. And so artificial colors also found in there. And so real root beer doesn't need any of those other fake things. Those have just been done to kind of cheapen it, to make it a commodity. We're going to make something that you'd be proud to serve your family and friends. And with Mountain Rose Herbs, we have everything we need. It's inexpensive, and it's a great activity for the whole family. So I'm going to show you my method called the 4-square method, which is using 4 parts to make root beer. I like to think of it as a 2-day process, starting the decoction one day and finishing it up the next day. What we're going to make is a syrup concentrate. So it'll be a very thick sugary solution, and that can be diluted with bubbly water to get the final product. And so you can make it and store it very easily for months in the refrigerator. The basic process is making a decoction with the herbs. So we'll go through the herbs shortly. We need roots for flavor, we need roots for color, we need roots for foaming, which is a key part of root beer. And then we will add the sugar, and then we'll add acid. And the acid is something you don't think of, but acid is something that gives us that tartness, and the tartness gives a refreshing, cooling flavor. And then the final step is carbonation. And so we'll use the home method, which is just making a syrup, pouring a couple ounces in a glass, and then pouring a can of plain bubbly water in there and stirring it up. And that's the simple, easy way. We'll also show you a couple other methods for carbonation. So that's making our herbal homemade root beer. All right, we're going to be making root beer syrup, and the first step is making the root decoction. Now, what is a decoction? Well, it's water with herbs brought to a boil and simmered from anywhere from 2 hours to overnight. We're going to do this overnight because we want to get all the benefit out of the herbs and extract them in hot water. And typically decoctions are done with roots and barks and seeds, things that are tough to break down and get the constituents out. Whereas infusions is just pouring a cup of hot water over a tea bag, and those are for delicate things like flowers and leaves and aromatics. And so we will add some of those later too. So either you need a crock pot or a pot and a stove. And this recipe, I really like the crock pot method. We just add our 4 liters of water. So you have to have a measuring container. And you could either put it in the crock pot and put your water in there, and then add the herbs, which I'll go over here in a second, and bring them to a boil, and then leave them on the stove at a simmer, just slightly boiling. In the crock pot, you could set it to high for 6 to 8 hours. So if you did it at bedtime, you would have it all done in the morning. And that's strained out, and that is your root decoction. Let's talk about the herbs that we're going to use. So the herbs fall into different categories. I call the first set the base herbs. The base herbs are going to be like the herbs that give the root beer its classic look, color, and taste. And in the recipe that's on the Mountain Rose Herbs blog, the details list of all the kinds of herbs. These are the classic ones I'm using today because we're going to try to make a root beer that's kind of geared toward helping support our immune system. And so I've added some immune roots and barks. So the key would be these 2 herbs first, and these are our base herbs, and that's dandelion root and burdock root, arctium and taraxacum. And those roots we're going to toast, and we're going to add 6 ounces of each into our decoction. And so I'm going to show you in a minute how to do those. But the burdock is, gobo, and it's one of those great edible herbs. It's found wild, and it's always known as an alterative. And the beautiful thing about toasting these is they can get a really rich color. And the root beers have to have like a darkness to them. Almost all commercial root beer has caramel coloring. Well, caramel coloring is fake. You can get the coloring from these base herbs, and that's what I want to show you. So we toast them like we would how they do coffee to get them really roasted. If you want, you can buy it already roasted. Avoid that step. But like making bread, roasting the roots, it's much more flavorful when you do it fresh and then add those herbs in there, because when you buy them pre-roasted, it could have been done weeks or months ago. And so we have the dandelion, which is very similar to burdock. It's a liver-supporting herb. It's also an alterative. It also has, the key things in there is it has starches that we're going to liberate by toasting and bring out the rich roasted herb flavor. And so many people think of roasted dandelion and burdock as a substitute for coffee. So it has a coffee-like flavor. Now we're going to go on to some of the adjunctive herbs, which add, this is the chaga mushroom. The chaga mushroom is great as an immune-supporting herb. What's beautiful about chaga is that it has melanin in it, and it's a dark pigment, and so it makes one of the most beautiful, naturally black liquids. And so I'm using it in this recipe for two reasons. One, for flavor. The flavor is fairly neutral. It's not bitter like a lot of mushrooms, but it's also great color, and it's great for its immune supportive. We also have Jamaican sarsaparilla. Now, smilax or sarsaparilla, a lot of people think that's the dominant flavor, and it's really not about the flavor. The flavor itself isn't that exciting. It's actually in there because it's saponin content. Saponins are natural molecules found in plants like licorice and smilax. And saponins have a soap-like foaminess. And so this is our foaming herb, because I want to have the natural foam that's found in root beer. Commercial root beers may have foaming agents that are artificial. This is what gives it the natural foaming. Then we have our beautiful reishi mushrooms. Reishi mushrooms, just so known for its support in the immune and cardiovascular system. And so I'm adding that again for a lot of its flavor. Now, it has a little bit of a bitterness, so the bitterness and the sugar are going to balance each other out. So you don't have to worry too much about bitter herbs. And finally, astragalus, one of the most well-known immune-supporting herbs. The astragalus has a beautiful light flavor. It's naturally sweet. And so it really would be great to add to the formulas if you want to avoid a really strong bitter taste. So those are the main base herbs. Then we're going to add flavoring herbs. Now, the flavoring herbs traditionally would be something like sassafras, but we don't use sassafras internally. So we've chosen a more of an anise base, anise. So we have anise seed. You could also use fennel seed. We have ginger root. So ginger, so I would technically call this burdock dandelion ginger root beer. And this is a very European English recipe, so dried or fresh. And then I have star anise. Star anise is that great spice that has such a great licorice-like flavor. And so those are the flavor herbs that we're going to add. So we'll come back and show you the decoction. We're going to roast the base herbs. And so what you need is a stainless steel or a cast iron pan, a stove, a wooden spoon, and then the base herbs. This is 6 ounces of dandelion and burdock, but you could also use pre-bought roasted. But I like doing my own because it makes a better flavor. And so what I'm going to do is pour both of these in. And it's kind of like toasting herbs to bring out some of the flavor. Now, roasting will change the starches and to break them down. And so it kind of makes it sweeter, as well as it makes it darker. And that's what we're looking for root beer. So you're going to bring it till it may smoke a little, so you might want to make sure you got the windows open or the fan on. And basically, you have to sit here and stir it for about 25 minutes. Well, we have our dandelion and burdock roots all roasted really dark. And now we're going to start the decoction. So I have 4 liters of water coming to a boil. And I'm going to add my roasted roots. These have cooled a little bit and stopped smoking, but they're real fresh. And stir those in. And now I'm going to add the rest of my base herbs. The chaga root, the Jamaican sarsaparilla. These are the reishi sticks, reishi mushroom, and astragalus. There's a lot of herbs in this, and that's because we want all the power of the plant to come out in this decoction. And so I'm going to bring this to a boil, and I will add the flavor herbs. This is the star anise. This is the anise seed. And this is the ginger root. Now you could use fresh ginger. Might make it a little stronger. Experiment with the amounts. Grated, I would say. All right, bring it to a boil and simmer it for 6 to 8 hours. Now I have all the decoction with the herbs in here, and it's time for straining. So I have a cloth burlap sack, I have a filter, and I have a measured container. And I'm going to transfer it. So this had been boiling all night, and you can see what a beautiful herb-rich solution this is. And I'm straining out the herbs. The finer the strain, the less pieces you have in there. And you could just use a sieve if you don't mind having a little bit of dust. So we'll probably do this a couple times. And you want to push down to extract all. If you had a press, you could use a little press, but it's mostly unnecessary. So you can see it's a little bit stronger than the tea bag in a cup of liquid. Again, we're making a concentrate, so we're going to dilute this with water, bubbly water at the end, and sugar. All right, we have the decoction, and now we're going to add the acids and the sugars. And so I've added 1 lemon. I'm going to add another lemon. I'm just going to use a little juicer here. And the thing about the lemon is 2 things, really. The peel is flavor, lemon oil, beautiful flavor. And the inside is juice, and the juice is acid. So we like to use a little bit of both. And so you can zest the lemons and put that into the decoction and then add the juice. I'm adding all the juice here at the end. It doesn't really matter whether you add it now or at the beginning. Of course, the acid's going to add a lot of nice flavor. I've filtered this a little. And then the other acids we have is we have citric acid, 1½ teaspoons. I'm going to rinse that in. And this is ascorbic acid. This is vitamin C. This is about 5,000 milligrams. And so vitamin C is not only an acid, it's vitamin C. So it's adding another nutritional benefit. I'm stirring those in. Now I'm ready to add the sugars. Now here's the part that's fun, is like, well, I have a lot of different kinds of sugars because I'm trying to layer the effects of sweetness to create a more complex flavor. The root decoction is roasted, rooty, and bitter. And so sugar is going to complement that. Since we're making a syrup, the recipe is very easy. Half decoction, half sugar. And so that's the idea. 1-to-1 gives a simple syrup that would be stable in the refrigerator for 3 to 4 months. And so I have sugar from the lightest to the darkest. And so this is organic cane sugar. Organic cane sugar has the sweetest flavor with no side notes, just sweetness. That's really good for subtle things. But since we have roasted roots, we can go into the darker end. So then I have light brown sugar and dark brown sugar and molasses. A little decreasing amounts of each one. And so it's going to layer the sweetness and have the effects to make a more complex root beer, meaning you'll taste sweet in the beginning, sweet in the middle, and sweet at the end. And so we're going to add all our sugars in here. These have all been measured out. The molasses, I'm going to let the little water sit there. Now I'm going to add the dark brown sugar. And it seems like a lot of sugar because it is, but we're diluting it eventually in the final product. So you can make as little or as much sugar as you want. What I'm going to do is kind of bring it back, not to boil, but just to warm enough to dissolve all the sweeteners. All right, now we have the fun part. We spent the last 2 days making this root beer syrup concentrate, and here it is. It has the decoction with the sugar and the acid, and it's a thick syrup, and it's actually about 60% sugar, which means we can dilute it significantly. And so this is very stable in the refrigerator for 3 to 4 months. And it's a concentrate. So we have some glasses here, and what we're going to do is put in about 2 ounces of the syrup. That is 1/4 cup. And it depends how much water you want to make it sweet. So I'm going to use bubbly water from the store, and you can fill it up, and I'm going to put some ice in there. And there you can see the beautiful foam that comes off because of the foaming herbs in there, and that is our root beer. I'm going to put a little bit more. Root beer does really well with citrus, and so I'm going to put a little zest of lemon here. And the zest is really just for the nose. You don't necessarily eat these, but you just put them on the top of the foam, and then this would be your homemade root beer. That's fantastic. There's another method of doing it, and this is the whipper method, this is called a whipper. It's designed to pressurize fluids. So you can get this and have the little cartridges of CO2, and I put 500 mils of this mixture of water and syrup. So I put 2 ounces, then I put the water, and then I put 1 cartridge to pressurize it. And the beautiful part about this, it pressurizes it without having to buy the water. Obviously, we have to have this. You hold it upside down, and out comes beautiful root beer pressurized. Now, that's very foamy, so you need to let it sit. The other way you can use this is you can use it as a foam topper for this. And that's another way you can serve it. And so this is a whipper, this is the home method, and enjoy your root beer.